Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We welcome you as well as all those tuned in via our streaming platforms on Smart Bilal, Facebook and YouTube to today's Jummah program at Masjid Al-Haq at the entrance of Lodium, Pretoria, South Africa. Today's topic is entitled, Is Halal Certified Actually Halal? The lecture will be delivered by Professor Farouk Hussein, who holds a master's degree from the University of KwaZulu-Natal. He is a lecturer, a researcher, and a curriculum developer. Jazakallah.
My head to be thank you. Technology at best, neither be your friend or your enemy. Auzubillahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin wal aqibatu lil muttaqin wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillahi Muhammadin wa alihi wa ashabihi wa ahli baitihi wa azwajihi wa zurriyyatihi ajma'in bi rahmatika ya arhamar rahimin. In the name of God, the merciful and compassionate, blessings of Allah and peace be upon our Habibi Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his family. O God, O exalted one, O gentle one, O all-knowing one, Thou art my Lord, and Thy knowledge is sufficient for me. What an excellent Lord is my Lord! What a wonderful sufficiency is my sufficiency! Our plea to Thee, O Allah, is for protection in our movements and moments of rest, in our words and in our desires and passing thoughts from doubts and suppositions. My Lord, expand for me my breast with assurance, and ease for me my task, and untie the knot from my tongue, that my Jama'at al-Muslimin and Mu'mineen can understand my speech. So a special thank you to the Imam and the leadership at Masjid Al-Haq for inviting me to speak on this topic. Is halal certified actually halal? The subtext of this could be, are we putting profit, in other words mullah or money, before profit, in other words our closeness towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What are we privileging? So the purpose of this talk then is to explain the importance of the understanding of the halal business from an Islamic perspective. It's nothing new. In fact, Professor Taylor from the University of Cape Town has written extensively on this topic. So the business use of the Quranic and fiqh word halal is now all pervasive. In fact, it's conspicuous because of the penetration of the halal product ideas and the emphasis on halal food having to be stamped. But also in the pharmaceutical and cosmetics and leisure and entertainment industry. So the way I approached my research was that I evaluated the Islamic authenticity of many of the prevailing halal business initiatives. In fact, I was shocked to find halal stamps even on a bottle of water. So I don't mind, people can do that if they wish to, but how does that bring me closer to God Almighty Allah? In fact, if you wish, I found in my research that even Coca-Cola is haram. So, you know, one could go and one could actually dig deep if one wants to. At this rate, even my jersey or my sweater will need a stamp as to whether it's halal or not. Of course, I'm being sardonic and of course I'm being cynical. So my talk will evaluate the Islamic authenticity of the prevailing halal business initiative. So the framework is based on the Quranic injunctions, and it has to be like that. and the instructions regarding simple things like usury or riba, intoxicants or khamar, and trade with mutual consent, taraddim minkum, and trading during Friday prayer or Jummah. Of course, all of this will have a direct or indirect implication for the management of the whole halal industry. I am, however, conceptually guided by Shahabuddin, Abu and Ido, and Muhammad and Hashim Noor, who already in 2020 focused on why is the halal industry focusing on the products rather than the concept from which it arises. Thank you, Sheikh. You're a real leader. Allah bless you for taking action. Thank you. I appreciate it. Your place is in heaven. And when you are there, don't forget to ask, where am I? So, I was saying that we have an overemphasis then on the product, on whether the bottle of water has a halal stamp or not. And I was guided conceptually by Shahabuddin, Abu and Ido, who in 2020 already alerted us about the overemphasis in the halal industry on product rather than the creation of habits of mind and ways of thinking about what is halal. So the material then for this talk was obtained mainly through the internet and the literature review of people like Professor Tayyab from the University of Cape Town. And what I noticed was that there was an overwhelming emphasis on the product. And the result was that it takes people further and further away from what taqwa is, from what it means to be aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the irony. Of course, it is important at the technical level to know what is halal and what is haram. So hence there's a need for a fundamental reorientation of the halal business, as I'm suggesting. There is the issue of ethics, and there is the issue of social responsibility, and also legal responsibility, and more importantly, moral and spiritual responsibility that require even deeper attention. So I would like to look not just at a juridical and a very rigid approach or technicist approach as to what is halal and what is haram. Because I ask all of us here, is that the right question to ask? So what might be the larger question? Is the halal industry, in fact, modeling the obsession of the Judaic tradition that before you can be a Jew, you have to be mindful of 613 rules before you can be a Jew. So actually all of you should say shukr Allah that I'm a Muslim, because you have a very basic need to approach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I ask you, where is the grandeur of God the Almighty Allah? And where does it appear and feature? And what's the depth of taqwa? When the Muslim mind obsesses about looking for a halal stamp, as I said to you earlier on, even on a bottle of water. So the term halal is actually an Arabic term which means permissible or lawful in Islam. In reference to food, it is Islamic dietary standard as prescribed in the Quran and Sharia. So haram then, by implication, is another Arabic term which means impermissible or unlawful in Islam. Our Habibi Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, halal is clear and haram or unlawful is clear. Between the two, there are doubtful matters concerning which people do not know. One who avoids them in order to safeguard the deen or the religion and his honor, they are safe. While if someone indulges in it, he may be indulging in the unlawful, and this is a quotation from Bukhari. So what are some of the Quranic laws? And I think it's important that we get back to the canonical text of the Quran, because that is where Allah is speaking directly to us. And in chapter 2, verse 172, it says, and an approximated translation is, O ye who believe,
Eat of the good things wherewith we have provided you, and render thanks to Allah, if it is He whom you worship. Unquote. The unlawful foods then are specifically mentioned in the glorious Quran in the following verse in chapter 2, verse 173, and I quote, "He hath forbidden you only carrion and blood and swine flesh, and that on which have been invoked other names besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala." And I would like to cite for you another verse from chapter 5, verse 3. "Forbidden unto you for food are carrion and food and swine flesh, and that on which have been invoked the names other than Allah, and the strangled, and the dead through beating, and the dead through falling from a height, and that which has been gored to death and devoured of wild beasts, saving that which you make lawful by slaughter and invoking Allah's name, and that which hath been immolated to idols, and that ye swear by the divining arrows. This is an abomination." So clearly, if you invoke Allah's name, that is sufficient to make it halal. So the consumption of alcohol and other intoxicants is also prohibited, and that's seen in chapter 5, verse 9. "O ye who believe, intoxicants and games of charms and idols and divining arrows are an abomination of Satan's handiwork. Leave it aside in order that he may succeed." So, of course, we know that meat is the most strictly regulated. And in chapter 6, verse 118, it says, "Eat of that over which the name of Allah has been mentioned if you are believers in His revelations." And again in chapter 6, verse 121, it says, "And eat not of that whereon Allah's name hath not been mentioned. For lo, it is an abomination. Lo, the devils do inspire their friends to contend with you. But if you obey them, you will be in truth idolaters." So, clearly then, there are sufficient reminders for all of you. Now, I want you to imagine that for every bottle of halal water and the stamp it has on, there's money to pay. Now, in the context of an increasingly plural and polarized world, where Christian apologetics are so strongly bent on maligning Islam and Muslims, is it not better to spend some of the money that's accumulated to try and improve inter and intra faith relations by informing, by conscientizing people about what is halal food? Are you aware of how people at certain functions will not even eat halal meat because of their hate for Muslims? So I'm suggesting that with this huge industry that we have of the halal industry, there are about 4 organizations. Just the other day on social media, the 4 organizations got together and published a statement that says, "It's my responsibility," well, it should be, to look to see whether any of the derivatives in the food has got the E stamp on, and the E stamp and its code will tell you whether that food is halal or not. So I'm asking you again, Jamaatul Mu'mineen, whether or not these people have the capacity, the wherewithal. In fairness to the Jews and their kosher kitchens, they are so strict about it. They have pumped in money to ensure that their food is in fact kosher. So I'm suggesting to all of us that in terms of the Quranic quotations that I have cited, we need to be mindful of what is halal and what is not halal, but at the same time, we have these 4 organizations now putting the responsibility on you, the consumer. But there's no excuse for not being aware of what is halal and what is not halal. So, of course, we know what is therefore lawful and permissible in terms of the Quran and Sharia. So, the problem is, and I'm aware that time is my enemy, the problem is that we are restricting the concept of halal only to products. We are restricting it only to food and dietary needs, but we're not extending it to a lifestyle. In fact, all of you, as I'm looking at you now, and I'm looking at you as a teacher or as a lecturer, as I looked at my students, you are all too deadly serious. You have to give thanks that you can listen, that you are able, you must smile. It's a form of, that's halal. So I'm saying to all of us, we have become so obsessed with things that take us further and further away, my beloved, from what is, taqwa and what should be lawful, where our lives are full of integrity and self-restraint. It extends beyond food. It extends beyond the halal stamp. And logic dictates that not everything that is not halal will be haram or unlawful and not permissible. In fact, some food in Islam is divided into the 4 categories which all of you know. It can be bush food, it can be questionable or doubtful, it can be forbidden, or it can be offensive. So, in fact, even makruh is less severe than haram, as it is said. So I'm saying to all of us, we need to go beyond what is an obsession with the product, and we need to go into looking at the concept of halal and haram in terms of a lifestyle. So there's much that I wish to say. In fact, if you're looking at what's happening in India, for instance, the Himalaya product, as you know, is Muslim owned. And they said that they have instituted a halal committee. Soon after that, the Hindutvas then created a hashtag that says boycott Muslim products. So I'm suggesting to all the Muslim halal authorities to start looking at educating people in South Africa, and in particular to neutralize the crusader, hateful cultists and their obsession with trying to demonize Muslims and Islam and the rules of Islam. I did have, another section on, what we need to consider when we are looking at halal foods, but I shall leave that out for now because time is my enemy. But advisedly to say that we are really obsessed with a product-centric halal business where the focus is on profit as in money rather than profit as in devotion to God Almighty. And one of the people that I would advise all of you to consult and to read about is the Kamali book, where he looks at Muhammad Kamali from Malaysia, where he looks at the Sharia and the halal industry, and he critiques how it risks taking us further away, and in fact we have ourselves become our own enemies with our halal phobia. So I want to end off then, and Sheikh Shamir will be relieved to know that I'm actually disciplined enough to be able to say that I would like to end off. And it is interesting that, again, what people make halal and what people make haram is as far removed from what the Quran says as you can imagine. So I need to ask the halal bodies and the halal authorities, do you people have the resources to do spot checks? In fact, there was a joke that did the rounds a few years ago where chickens were on the conveyor belt, and there was a recording that just said Bismillah, and the chicken's head were chopped off. Now that's, that doesn't mean that the blood of the chicken is actually being released properly, which is one of the criteria for making it halal. So that is one of the things that people have mentioned about. Meat, for instance, from Brazil that entered South Africa a few years ago, and that was not halal meat, but people had actually re-stamped that meat. So again, I'm asking, do the halal authorities have the wherewithal, like the kosher people have, to investigate and to quality assure what is halal and what is not halal? Do they do spot checks? Are they following strict protocols? And in fact, Do they have the organizational and financial wherewithal to assure the quality industry of what is halal and what is not halal? And finally, what is being done with all the money that they have? Should they not be using it to promote, an understanding of what is halal? So I pray that I haven't created any kind of cognitive dissonance, what we call cognitive of the head, dissonance, conflict within all of you, but that it has rather been a source of inspiration and hope, and that I pray that we all have an enduring success to understand what is taqwa and what it is to be a good Muslim, and what it is to enjoy being a good Muslim, and to free ourselves from the literal and to go off more into the beauty and the grandeur of God Almighty. So may the angels sing their praises for all of you. La ilaha illa anta subhanaka inni kuntu minaz zalimin wa sallallahu ta'ala ala khayri khalqi Muhammadin wa alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in bi rahmatika ya arhamar rahimin. Jamaatul Muslimin, thank you for listening. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.